Robert Harrison had everything a man could want. At 58 years old, he owned 3 successful businesses across the state. His home was a beautiful colonial in the suburbs, with tall windows that let in the morning, light and a kitchen most people only dreamed of. But success had cost him something precious. His marriage had ended 5 years ago. His daughter lived across the country now, busy with her own family. And Robert? Well, Robert worked. That's what he did. That's all he seemed to know how to do anymore. On this particular Tuesday evening, Robert's car pulled into the driveway at 9:30. Later than usual. A merger meeting had run long. Then there were contracts to review, phone calls to return. The routine of a busy man. He loosened his tie as he walked to the front door, his leather briefcase heavy in his hand. The house would be quiet, he knew, just the way he'd left it that morning. He'd warm up something from the refrigerator, maybe watch the news, then head to bed. Tomorrow would be another early start. But when Robert opened the door, something was different. He could hear laughter, a child's laughter coming from the kitchen. Robert set down his briefcase carefully. His housekeeper, Grace Thompson, only worked until 5. She should have been home with her own family hours ago. He walked slowly toward the kitchen, confused but not alarmed. The sight that greeted him made him stop in the doorway. Grace was there, still in her gray uniform with its white collar and trim. She was wiping her eyes, clearly trying not to cry. And sitting on the kitchen counter, swinging his little legs and grinning from ear to ear, was a boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with dark hair and bright, curious eyes. There was a bowl of oranges beside him. The boy was telling Grace something in an animated voice, his small hands moving as he spoke. Grace was nodding, smiling through her tears, holding one of his hands in both of hers. "Grace?" Robert said softly. Both of them turned to look at him. Grace's face went pale. She stood up quickly, smoothing her uniform. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice shaking slightly. I'm so sorry. I should have called. I should have asked permission. I didn't know what else to do." The boy looked at Robert with open curiosity, not frightened, just interested in this new person who'd appeared. Robert stepped into the kitchen, setting his briefcase on one of the chairs. He kept his voice gentle. "What's going on, Grace?" Grace took a breath. She'd worked for Robert for 3 years. He'd always been fair, always kind, but this was asking too much. "This is my nephew, Daniel," she said quietly. "My sister. She called me this afternoon. She's in the hospital. An emergency appendectomy. Her husband's deployed overseas. There was no one else to watch Daniel. The neighbors couldn't take him. I called everyone I could think of, but..." Her voice trailed off. She looked down at her hands. "I know I should have left," Grace continued. "I know this isn't part of my job. But I couldn't leave him alone, and I couldn't reach you. I thought maybe I could just stay here until you came home, and then explain, and then we'd leave right away." Robert looked at Daniel. The boy was watching this exchange with big eyes, sensing the tension even if he didn't fully understand it. "Hi, Daniel," Robert said, offering a small smile. "I'm Robert. This is my house." "Hi," Daniel said, his voice small but not scared. "Aunt Grace says you're very important. She says you help lots of people with their jobs." Robert felt something shift in his chest. It had been so long since a child had looked at him like that, with simple trust, with innocence. "Your Aunt Grace is very kind," Robert said. He turned to Grace. "How long will your sister be in the hospital?" "They're keeping her overnight for observation," Grace said. "Maybe tomorrow night, too." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrison. This won't happen again. I'll make other arrangements. I just needed tonight." Robert was quiet for a moment. He looked around his big, empty kitchen, at the bowl of oranges someone had arranged, at the child who'd brought laughter into this silent house. He thought about his own daughter at that age, how he'd missed so many bedtimes, so many school plays, always working, always building his empire. "Have you two had dinner?" Robert asked. Grace blinked. No, not yet. I was just about to." "Then why don't we all eat together?" Robert said. He shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over a chair. "What do you say, Daniel? Are you hungry?" The boy's face lit up. "Really hungry. Aunt Grace said we'd get something on the way home, but this is nicer." Over the next hour, something remarkable happened in Robert Harrison's kitchen. He'd intended to order pizza, but Grace insisted she could make something simple. She found pasta in the pantry, vegetables in the refrigerator. Robert found himself helping, chopping tomatoes at her direction while she boiled water, and Daniel told them both about his school day. "We're learning about the solar system," Daniel said, still sitting on the counter. "Did you know that Jupiter is so big that all the other planets could fit inside it?" "I did not know that," Robert said, smiling despite himself. "That's pretty amazing. And Saturn has like 1,000,000 rings. Well, not 1,000,000, but lots. Mrs. Peterson said they're made of ice and rocks." Grace glanced at Robert, worried she was letting Daniel talk too much. But Robert was nodding, asking questions, genuinely interested. They ate together at the kitchen table. Grace kept apologizing. Robert kept telling her it was fine, really, it was fine. And Daniel kept talking, filling the space with stories about his friends. His mom, the cat that lived in their apartment building. After dinner, Daniel yawned hugely. The excitement of the day was catching up with him. "It's past your bedtime," Grace said gently. "Way past." Robert stood up. "The guest room upstairs is made up. You're both welcome to stay the night." Grace's eyes widened. "Mr. Harrison, I couldn't possibly—" "Grace," Robert said quietly, "it's a big house. Too big for just me. And it's late. Daniel needs to sleep. Your sister needs you to be rested so you can visit her tomorrow." He paused. "Please, let me do this." There was something in his voice. A loneliness, maybe. Or a need to give something back after taking so much from the world for so long. Grace's eyes filled with tears again. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Robert showed them upstairs. The guest room had a large bed with a blue comforter. Daniel's eyes went wide. "It's like a hotel," he said. While Grace helped Daniel get ready for bed, Robert found himself standing in the hallway listening to their voices. The gentle murmur of a child's prayers, Grace's soft replies. When she came out, closing the door softly behind her, she looked exhausted. "He's asleep already," she said. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I don't know how to repay—" "You don't have to repay anything," Robert said. He hesitated, then added, "Grace, in 3 years I never asked about your family. Your life outside this house. That was wrong of me." Grace shook her head. "You're a good employer. You've always been fair." "Fair isn't the same as kind," Robert said softly. "I forgot that somewhere along the way." They stood there in the quiet hallway for a moment. "My daughter was about Daniel's age when my wife and I separated," Robert said. "I thought if I worked hard enough, made enough money, that would be enough. That would show I loved her." He smiled sadly. "I was wrong. Now she's grown and I missed it all." Grace touched his arm gently. "It's never too late, Mr. Harrison, not really." The next morning, Robert woke earlier than usual. He came downstairs to find Grace already in the kitchen, making breakfast. Daniel was at the table, drawing on a piece of paper. "Good morning," Robert said. "Morning," Daniel said brightly. "Look, I drew your house. Aunt Grace said it's okay." Robert looked at the drawing. A big house with lots of windows. Stick figures in front, a sun in the corner. "That's wonderful," Robert said, and meant it. They ate breakfast together, pancakes, real ones made from scratch. Robert couldn't remember the last time he'd had a meal like this in his own home. Afterward, as Grace prepared to take Daniel to see his mother, Robert made a decision. "Grace," he said, "take the rest of the week off. Paid, of course. Be with your sister and Daniel. Family comes first." Grace looked stunned. "Mr. Harrison, I can't accept—" "You can, and you will," Robert said firmly but kindly. "And when you come back, I'd like to talk about changing your hours. Maybe something more flexible. Something that works better for your family." "But why?" Grace asked, bewildered. Robert glanced at Daniel, who was putting on his jacket by the door. "Because last night, for the first time in years, this house felt like a home," Robert said simply. "You reminded me what matters. That's worth more than any work I could do." That evening, alone again in his big house, Robert did something he hadn't done in months. He called his daughter. "Dad?" Sarah answered, surprised. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Robert said. I wanted to talk, to hear your voice, to ask about your kids, about your life." There was a pause. Then Sarah's voice came back, warm and surprised and pleased. "I'd like that, Dad. I'd really like that." They talked for an hour. About her children who Robert barely knew. About her job, her husband, her dreams. And for the first time, Robert really listened. not planning his next meeting in his head, not checking his watch, just listening. When Grace returned to work the following Monday, she found a note on the kitchen counter. "Dear Grace," it read, "thank you for reminding me what a home is for. I've adjusted your salary to reflect your value to me, which goes far beyond cleaning and cooking. You make this house feel alive. I hope someday Daniel will visit again. Bring him any time. Warmly, Robert." Attached was a new contract with better hours, better pay, and a benefit Grace had never had before. Time off for family emergencies, no questions asked. Grace stood in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face, holding that note like the precious thing it was. Robert Harrison had everything a man could want. But it took a housekeeper's nephew, sitting on his kitchen counter eating oranges, to show him what he'd been missing. Kindness, connection, home, the things that money couldn't buy but that an open heart could always find.